Arthur Spencer, the CEO of Spencer Group, was watching the city from the window of his luxurious office. Wealth, prestige, and success. Everything was at his fingertips. Yet, the emptiness inside him seemed to swallow all of it whole. Every day was filled with business meetings, countless phone calls, and new deals. But nothing made his heart race. Nothing gave him real satisfaction. Women were drawn to him because of his money and fame, but they were all the same. They loved him only for his wealth. Today, however, something felt different. At Spencer Group's annual gala, Arthur found himself, as always, alone. But amidst the crowd, his attention was drawn to a woman in an unusual way. She wore a much simpler dress than the glamorous outfits he was used to seeing. Her dark brown hair gave her a natural elegance. Her face carried an enchanting simplicity, and her eyes held a strange emptiness. She looked like a woman who wasn't chasing anything, a solitary soul. As Arthur approached her, he felt an inexplicable pull. The woman kept her distance from the crowd, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Arthur took a few steps toward her and gently inclined his head. "Hello," he said. The woman lifted her gaze to meet his. There was something behind the emptiness in her eyes, but Arthur couldn't quite figure out what it was. She smiled faintly and gave him a subtle nod. "Hello," she replied, but there was a certain distance in her tone. Arthur noticed her reserved demeanor and added, "I assume you don't know who I am." The woman gave a small smile, though her voice remained serious. "Everyone is like you, aren't they?" she replied. Arthur looked at her in surprise. "Yes, I suppose so. But you're different," he said. This woman wasn't putting on any kind of show. Arthur was used to that. Yet somehow, he could sense the mysterious void within her. "My name is Sophie," she said. Her gaze lingered on Arthur for a moment, growing more observant. But then, as if the conversation made her uneasy, she quickly added, "Sophie Wilkins." The name echoed in Arthur's mind. Wilkins, the family of a rival company's CEO. For a brief moment, suspicion flickered in his eyes. Sophie's expression betrayed her discomfort, yet something about her drew him in. No matter what, he found himself compelled by the desire to know Sophie Wilkins. When Arthur heard the name Sophie Wilkins, a cold wind seemed to sweep through his heart. The rivalry between Spencer Group and the Wilkins family had been an endless battle for years. Every new day was spent trying to overshadow each other's success. But when he realized that this seemingly ordinary woman was the daughter of a man who was his company's enemy, his sense of peace wavered. For a fleeting moment, the reflection in Sophie's eyes had captivated him. But as he regained his focus, understanding that the woman before him was more than just the heiress of a business empire felt like an awakening. There was something in Sophie's gaze, something that hinted at a burden she had carried for years, an effort to conceal a deep secret. The sorrow in her eyes was an even greater invitation for a man who wanted to truly know her. However, deciding to pursue a deeper connection with her was not an easy choice for Arthur. He had no idea how the secret buried in Sophie's past was tied to the future of Spencer Group. Sophie was a woman who tried to honor her family's name, but in doing so, she had set aside her own life. Her father's expectations cast a shadow over her every move. As the daughter of the Wilkins Group's CEO, she was always expected to act properly, to associate only with the right people. But this demanding identity had come at a great cost. Sophie's true self was buried deep within her, too afraid to rise to the surface. Meeting Arthur had felt like a dream. He was so different from what she had known that, in an unexpected way, her interest in him seemed to complete the missing pieces of herself. Arthur had begun to pick up small clues about the complexity of Sophie's inner world. Every moment he spent with her left him with more unanswered questions. On one side, there was the weight and pressure she carried. On the other, his growing curiosity and affection for her. But the balance between these two created an uneasy void within him. On one hand, she was the daughter of his business rival. On the other, there was the undeniable pull between them and his desire to help her rediscover the freedom she had lost. One evening, Arthur and Sophie crossed paths once again. A Spencer Group event had given them the chance to close the distance between them. Sophie approached him, the depth in her eyes more pronounced than ever. Though the hours they spent together were filled with surface-level conversations, the turmoil within them only grew stronger. Arthur tried to understand the silence he found in her. The more time he spent with her, the deeper his feelings became. Yet, each time he realized that something was missing: trust. He felt that Sophie had not fully let him in. It wasn't just the complexity within her. It was also the fears hidden deep in her subconscious. "Arthur," Sophie said at the end of the night, uncertainty laced in her voice. "Would you like to know me more? To truly learn who I am?" Arthur sensed something in her words. Sophie seemed willing to share more with him, but at the same time, she was afraid. It was an effort to bridge the distance between them, yet it also raised even more questions. He took a deep breath, determination settling on his face. "Yes, I want to know you," he said. "But I want to know the real you, Sophie. With nothing hidden, with no walls between us." For a moment, Sophie's eyes froze. No matter how much she wanted to resist, she tried to push her fears away. "Maybe this is the first time someone is truly trying to understand me," Sophie said, uncertainty laced in her voice. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. But it wasn't clear enough to be defined as hope or fear. Sophie hesitated to reveal the emotions she had buried for so long. She looked as if she was about to say something more, but then she fell silent. Under Arthur's loyal and trusting gaze, she felt vulnerable. And at that moment, she realized something. Arthur had truly seen the emptiness inside her. Arthur noticed the delicate fragility in Sophie's eyes. Reaching into the depths of someone's heart was not something just anyone could do. But the restlessness and urge to escape within Sophie had not escaped his attention. He genuinely wanted to know her, yet he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to heal the wounds she had opened. His curiosity pressed on him more and more each day. "Sophie, understanding you isn't difficult," Arthur said, his voice filled with patience and determination. I just want what's best for you. We can figure this out together." Sophie wanted to respond to Arthur's words with sincerity, but the shadow of her past still loomed over her. The life her father and family had imposed on her still echoed in her mind. No matter how strong Arthur's love and trust were, she always took a step back. The darkness within her prevented her from getting closer to him. "I know how good you are, Arthur," she said, without meeting his gaze. "But I don't belong in this world. Your world, it's so different. And I'm still fighting my past." Arthur watched the emptiness in Sophie's eyes for a moment longer. It was so deep that he wanted to dig further, to discover more. But he couldn't push her. He knew that healing Sophie's emotional wounds would take time. Sophie noticed Arthur's silence. At that moment, she felt just how much he cared for her. But in her eyes, there was still something she was running from. The fear of the truth coming to light, perhaps the fear of facing what she had once escaped, was holding her back. "Sophie, I want to share everything with you," Arthur said. "But first, you need to trust me. No matter how dark your past is, I want to be here. I want to be by your side." Sophie instinctively took a step back, feeling more vulnerable. Accepting this wasn't easy. The responsibilities her family had placed on her, the pressure of being the rival company's CEO's daughter. "How can I explain all of this to Arthur?" she thought, trying to suppress her anxiety. The darkness her family had left behind only grew bigger with each passing day. Every single detail that could put her in a difficult position felt like a chain tightening around her soul. If she told Arthur the truth, the fear of losing him might be greater than all her other fears. Even though she knew how trustworthy he was, fully surrendering to him felt like an impossible step. Arthur's patient gaze remained on her. Sophie had once thought of him as just a businessman, but he was more than that. Arthur Spencer wasn't just a millionaire or a successful CEO. The world around him was a place Sophie could never belong to. And yet, despite everything, Arthur was trying to offer her a piece of something real. It made her feel like someone who could be loved, but at the same time, that feeling pushed her into an even deeper loneliness. She took a deep breath and lowered her head. "Maybe accepting you as you are won't be as hard as I feared," she said. But just then, she heard Arthur's footsteps and looked up into his eyes. "But in your world, I could never exist. My past, it could destroy your future." Arthur was shaken by Sophie's words. For a moment, the confidence on his face disappeared, replaced by a mix of emotions. He knew things were getting more complicated, but even so, the thought of giving up on his feelings for her was impossible. "Your past is a part of you. But no matter what, your future should be with me. We can face everything together." Sophie's turmoil deepened with Arthur's words. Everything seemed so simple, so easy when he spoke. But Sophie always chose to stay one step behind. Because there was something Arthur didn't know. Sophie's family and her father, the CEO of their rival company, posed a serious threat to Spencer Group's success. Yet Sophie couldn't find peace within herself without revealing the truth, not even to Arthur. They remained silent for a while. Sophie, unable to take her eyes off Arthur, tried to make a decision deep in her heart. If she could do this, perhaps she could finally fill the emptiness in her life, overcome her losses, and truly trust Arthur. But she had no idea how to do it. After a brief silence, Arthur finally spoke. "Sophie," he said, "if you trust me, you can tell me everything. Your past may have shaped you, but it doesn't stop me from knowing who you are. No matter how deep it goes, I will love you because I want to accept you as you are." Sophie felt the depth and determination in Arthur's words. No matter how difficult it was, she had to open up to him. When the time came, everything had to be revealed. But as she looked at Arthur with all the love she felt for him, making this decision brought her a small sense of peace. At that moment, Sophie saw the loyalty and love in Arthur's eyes. For just a moment, all her fears seemed to fade into the background. But still, the weight on her shoulders would not be easy to bear. "I will tell you everything," Sophie said, her voice trembling but firm. "But first, I need to say something. In your world, I cannot exist without facing my past. But losing you is the greatest fear of all." Arthur listened carefully to Sophie's words. Even though his emotions were tangled, he knew he understood her. In her eyes, he saw the collision between past and future. But he had made a promise to her. "We will get through this together, Sophie. Just trust me." Sophie took a deep breath and slowly began to speak. "My father, he was never my ally. He is the CEO of Wilkins Group, and in his eyes, everything is a competition. All my life, I have been nothing more than a tool to him. But the rivalry between Spencer Group and my father has kept me from knowing where I truly belong." Arthur froze at Sophie's words. "Your father saw you that way?" he asked, his voice filled with shock and sadness. Sophie nodded. "Yes, and maybe that's why everything is so wrong. Because I didn't follow his plans. And now, standing before me, is the CEO of Spencer Group, a man offering to change my life." Arthur felt Sophie's pain and hesitation. But at the same time, he saw the strength and courage within her. And at that moment, he knew that standing by her side, supporting her with everything he had, was the only right thing to do. What Sophie said left an echo in Arthur's soul. He realized that everything was more complicated, but he believed that love had the power to overcome any hardship. He wanted to spend more time with her, to fill the voids inside him, to understand her. However, there was a wall in Sophie's world, a boundary. This boundary was tied both to her past and to the resentment her family held against Spencer Group. Arthur could sense the deep emptiness within Sophie's soul just by looking into her eyes. Even though Sophie had begun to trust him, her fears had not completely disappeared. The pressure from her family, the responsibilities imposed by her father, and the ongoing rivalry with Wilkins Group constantly unsettled her thoughts. Such a major change both scared and attracted her. But most importantly, Sophie was aware of the danger this relationship carried. A week later, Arthur and Sophie met for a business dinner. That evening, Sophie intended to open up to Arthur more. Every moment she spent with him gave her more courage to share her secrets. However, that night would become a turning point for both of them. Seated in a dimly lit corner of the restaurant, Sophie took a deep breath. The emotional storm inside her was not settling, it was only growing stronger. Arthur looked at her carefully and said, "If you share something with me today, I feel like we can grow even closer." Drawing courage from Arthur's expectant gaze, Sophie focused her eyes on his. "Arthur, I want to be with you, but my father..." She paused before finishing her sentence. "He has always controlled me. I have always followed his rules. The rivalry between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group has shaped every moment of my life. I know how complicated this relationship is for me. And above all, I don't want to lose you." Arthur leaned in, gazing into Sophie's eyes. "You won't lose me," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "This is just your past, but our future is in our hands. I trust you, and I will carry this burden with you." Sophie wanted to believe in Arthur's words, but it wasn't easy to free her trust from the shadows of her past. Even though Arthur gave her a sense of security, her fears still hadn't vanished. Her family, the power struggle between companies. Everything felt like it was about to resurface all at once. The next morning, Sophie's uncertainty had only grown stronger. While sipping her morning coffee, she received a message on her phone. The moment she saw the sender's name, her heart started racing. It was from her father. She opened the message, and the words on the screen blurred before her eyes. She held the phone in her hands for a while, lost in thought. Her father had always threatened her with a calculated coldness and sharp precision. But this time, the tone of the message was different. It was more direct, more severe. You didn't act as your father wanted, Sophie. You know that you must end this relationship for the future of Wilkins Group. Arthur Spencer is a danger to you. I tried to convince you, but you are forbidden from allowing this. You must act only in the best interests of business. Sophie's hands started trembling. She read the message over and over again, the words spinning in her mind, but her uncertainty did not fade. Her relationship with Arthur was growing deeper with each passing day, and she was feeling stronger emotions. Yet, at the same time, her father's shadow loomed over her, threatening their relationship at every turn. She took a deep breath without taking her eyes off the screen. As always, her father was increasing the pressure. This message was more than just another threat. It was a sign of a turning point in Sophie's life. Arthur, as the CEO of Spencer Group, was Wilkins Group's biggest rival. To her father, this relationship was unacceptable both personally and professionally. Spending more time with Arthur would mean severing her ties with her family entirely. On one side was her father's constant pressure, on the other, her feelings for Arthur. Sophie turned off her phone, not knowing what to do. Her eyes were unfocused, and her mind was caught in a storm of thoughts. The longer she continued this relationship, the deeper she would be drawn into a battle within the business world. That evening, Arthur called Sophie. Sophie, I want to spend more time with you today. I've made a reservation at your favorite restaurant tonight. Let's talk. We can figure everything out together. Arthur's voice felt like an opportunity for peace. But at the same time, it was time to confront her father's threats. Tonight, Sophie said, her voice low and uncertain. Maybe it's time to share my past completely. But I don't know how to begin. There was surprise in Arthur's voice, but also a sense of relief. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. You don't have to run from your past, Sophie. I accept all of you, and I trust you. Sophie found a bit of solace in Arthur's words. But still, her father's pressure and the rivalry between the companies weighed heavily on her. She wanted to trust Arthur completely and tell him everything, but at the same time, her fear continued to grow. On one side was love, and on the other, family and the business world. When the time for dinner arrived, Sophie eagerly stepped into the restaurant, looking forward to seeing Arthur. However, as she slowly walked toward their table, she felt both a sense of relief and the echoes of her father's threats in her mind. With every step she took, she was on the verge of making a decision that would change the balance of her entire life. Arthur noticed the hesitation within Sophie. They were so close, yet so distant. There was turmoil in Sophie's eyes. As she sat down at the table, she spoke with her gaze. Arthur, I need you to listen. No matter what happens, we will face everything together. Sophie remained silent for a moment, then took a deep breath before speaking. Arthur, I need to tell you everything. But first, you need to understand the burden this relationship carries. Arthur leaned closer. Sophie, I want to support you in every way. I accept your past, but now we must take a step toward the future together. Sophie felt the confidence in Arthur's eyes. But at that moment, her fear only grew stronger. Her father's threats, the rivalry between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group. Everything was converging at once. Now, the question constantly circling in her mind was whether to continue this relationship or to walk away from everything. I will tell you everything, Sophie said, struggling to keep the tremor out of her voice. My father is the CEO of Wilkins Group, and we have always been Spencer Group's biggest rivals. But I love you, Arthur. I really love you. I can't continue this relationship, but the thought of losing you terrifies me. Arthur gazed at her with deep understanding. Sophie, I am willing to risk everything to be with you. The rivalry between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group cannot stand in the way of our love. The only thing that matters is being together. When I choose to be with you, I'm not just saying I love you. I'm saying I will face every challenge with you. Sophie took a deep breath, seeing the love and confidence in Arthur's eyes. The walls within her slowly began to crumble. Every word he spoke gave her an inner peace and courage. But there was one thing she didn't know. Bridging the gap between Arthur's promises and her father's threats would not be easy. When Sophie decided to tell Arthur everything, her heart pounded as if it would burst out of her chest. The love in his eyes gave her strength, yet the thought of telling the truth became a heavy burden. She had to shed her fears and reveal everything. Because to build a relationship, everything had to be laid bare. She trusted Arthur, but her father's threats constantly occupied her mind. For a moment, silence filled the restaurant. Sophie's eyes studied Arthur's hands, then his face, taking in every detail. At that moment, a feeling stronger than she had expected overwhelmed her. The trust Arthur had in her erased her doubts. But facing her father, being the daughter of the Wilkins Group's CEO, was a much deeper and more complicated issue. Sophie took a deep breath, then, without looking away from Arthur, she began to speak. "Arthur," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "this is hard to tell you because everything I have with you is something I've always run away from in my life. But now I feel like I have to share everything. I am from the Wilkins family. My father is the CEO of Wilkins Group. And our family has always been rivals with Spencer Group." Arthur froze at her words. But the sadness in Sophie's voice carried a deep pain. Seeing the struggle in her eyes was proof of the difficult journey she had been on. However, Arthur knew that something had to change. At that moment, he needed to know more to fully understand their relationship. "Go on, Sophie," Arthur said, his eyes focused on her. "I know this is very difficult for you, but I will support you in everything. Your past shapes you, but we need to look to the future. If this is right for you, we will be together." Sophie saw the determination in Arthur's eyes, and for a moment, all her fears felt a little lighter. But continuing, facing her father's threats, standing against Spencer Group, it wasn't easy. The pressure her father placed on her and the decisions he made had affected every moment of her life. "My father," Sophie continued, without averting her gaze, "has always aimed to destroy Spencer Group. And I have always acted the way he wanted me to in this war. But right now, what I feel for you, it's beyond everything. I just don't want to lose you. But my father has always expected me to do the right thing. Even telling you this means questioning my relationship with him." Arthur gave Sophie a deep look. As he listened to her words, he understood more about the pain and loneliness she had kept buried inside for years. Her relationship with her father was like an old wound she had never fully healed. But now, despite Sophie's emotions, they needed to find a way to keep their relationship going. "I understand that everything has become even more complicated for you," Arthur said. "But I'm here for you, Sophie. This rivalry between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group cannot define our relationship. If we decide to be together, we can overcome anything." Sophie, encouraged by Arthur's words, slowly nodded. At that moment, she decided to fight the biggest battle of her life. She completely trusted Arthur, but her family responsibilities and her father's threats were still obstacles. However, Arthur's words felt like a ray of hope. Perhaps the biggest obstacle she had to overcome was her own fears. "We can do this," Sophie said, determination shining in her eyes. "But my father's decision stands in the way of everything. This battle against Spencer Group could destroy our relationship. Being with you is the right choice for my life. But now, I have to make a choice against my father as well." Arthur, without breaking eye contact, placed his hand over hers. "Sophie, I am ready to face any challenge with you. Your past shouldn't define you. Who you are should define you. If we are together, we can overcome anything." As Sophie squeezed Arthur's hand, some of the anxiety inside her began to fade. In that moment, the strength and determination that came with being together pushed all her fears aside. But her father's pressure and the future of Wilkins Group still loomed over them, threatening their relationship. Sophie and Arthur, with the trust they had in each other, decided to break free from the shadows of the past and make a new beginning. However, this new start encompassed not only their love but also their inner conflicts, their families, and the challenges they faced in the business world. Sophie's confrontation with her father would not only change her life, but also their relationship forever. This confrontation would be pivotal, not just for them, but for the future of the two companies as well. Sophie and Arthur, emboldened by their togetherness, began to deepen the trust they had in each other, preparing for the greatest challenge of their lives. Their relationship was growing stronger with each passing day, filled with more love, but there were challenges ahead that would test both of them. Sophie could feel the storm brewing in their lives, fueled by her father's pressure and the competition with Spencer Group. Arthur, on the other hand, had buried the fear of losing Sophie deep within him, desiring to overcome everything with his love for her. However, Sophie's father's threat loomed over them both, putting their relationship and their future in the business world at risk. For a week, Sophie and Arthur engaged in endless conversations and plans. No matter how much they trusted each other, and no matter how much they believed they could overcome anything, it was clear that when they decided to take a step forward, a massive wall would be waiting for them. Sophie's father had already built that wall for them. That morning, Arthur was deep in a meeting at Spencer Group's headquarters, discussing new deals and partnerships. But he couldn't stop thinking about the moment when Sophie would make her decision. In his mind, there was one question: how difficult would it be to face Sophie's father? But at that moment, the action he was about to take would be a big step that would determine the future of their relationship. Sophie hesitated to call her father, but the moment to confront him had arrived. She wanted to build her future with Arthur, but her father's approach had always been a barrier. When she called, the person who answered the phone responded coldly and formally. "Sophie, I thought I'd be hearing from you." "Father," Sophie said, her voice trembling, "I have to tell you, my relationship with Arthur, above all else, this is our decision." Her father was silent for a few seconds. Then, after taking a deep breath, he replied, "Sophie, I know, but this could harm the family business. Your closeness to Spencer Group poses a threat to the future of Wilkins Group. Your relationship with Arthur will complicate things. I need you to end it." When Sophie heard her father's words, her anger and frustration grew. But there was determination in her eyes. Instead of following his demand, she decided to choose another path in her life. "Father, I love you, but I want to be with Arthur. Things may be complicated, but I trust him. I need you to understand that." When her father realized the determination in Sophie's voice, he fell into a deep silence. For the first time, he felt something toward her words, a sense of disappointment, but also a hint of fear. Finally, he responded harshly, "If you continue with Arthur Spencer, you will be completely cut off from both the family business and from me." When Sophie looked at the phone screen, despite her father's harsh response, she felt a sense of relief in her heart. Something had to change. She had to stop letting her father's pressure and threats shape her life. Her love for Arthur and the trust she had in him were opening a new path for her. After the confrontation ended and the phone call was disconnected, Sophie took a deep breath. Now, she could explain her relationship with Arthur. She truly loved him and wanted to build her life with him. But at the same time, what would the future hold for the competition between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group? This was the turning point in their lives. Later that day, Sophie headed to the restaurant to meet Arthur. Talking to him about everything would be difficult, as it would involve making decisions that could potentially unite their lives. But Sophie was ready for it. She slowly entered the restaurant and searched for Arthur with her eyes. In that moment, all her fears and worries seemed to disappear. Looking into his eyes, she felt that everything was right. When Arthur saw Sophie, he smiled. "Sophie, you finally came," he said, placing his hand on the table. "We can overcome everything, right?" Sophie looked into Arthur's eyes and took a deep breath. "Yes, we can overcome everything," she said. "But first, we need to clarify everything. My father, he threatened me. If I continue with you, the competition between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group will escalate." Arthur slowly nodded and moved closer to her. "I know, Sophie, but I love you, and I'm ready to overcome everything with you." These words brought a sense of relief to Sophie's heart. Once again, she felt that being with him was the right choice. But both of them realized that they were about to face a major battle. To protect this love, they would have to take huge risks, not just emotionally, but also in the business world. After a major confrontation, Sophie and Arthur deepened their commitment to each other and decided to turn a new page in their lives. However, with each passing day, a tough test awaited their relationship. The pressure from Sophie's family, the future of Wilkins Group, and the competition with Spencer Group were threatening their bond. Yet now, their trust and love for one another made them determined to face this challenge together, despite all obstacles. Sophie's father had taken his threat of severing ties seriously. However, this did not break Sophie and Arthur's determination. Building a future together with Arthur had become more important than anything else. Their relationship symbolized not only love, but also a significant change to be made in the business world. One morning, a large meeting was being held at Spencer Group's headquarters. As Arthur discussed the strategic plans for the company's future, his mind kept returning to what Sophie had said. The battle with Wilkins Group was not only creating a major transformation in their personal lives, but also in the business world. Arthur was determined to do whatever it took to not lose Sophie. However, the tension with Sophie's father could put both companies in a difficult position, potentially making them an even greater threat. During the meeting, Arthur checked his phone several times, waiting for a message from Sophie. At that moment, he was eager to spend the next few hours with her. As Sophie had said, everything needed to be clarified. If they were going to be together, they knew they could overcome any obstacle. As the afternoon approached, Sophie sent Arthur a message suggesting they meet at the restaurant. "I want to see you today," she wrote. "We need to talk about what we need to do to overcome everything." Arthur quickly turned off his phone and began preparing to meet Sophie. Talking to her might mean clearing everything up for the final time. This was the turning point in their lives, both in business and in their relationship. They trusted each other, but they were still facing the reality that they were taking a huge risk. When Arthur entered the restaurant, he saw Sophie sitting at a table. The moment their eyes met, a sense of calm washed over him. Sophie smiled faintly when she saw Arthur, but her determination was as evident as ever. She was on the brink of taking a major step. When Arthur sat down at the table, his eyes showed confidence. "Sophie, I'm determined to tell you everything. We will do whatever it takes for us. The threats from Wilkins Group, your father's words, they're all temporary. But being with you, that's permanent." Sophie looked at Arthur, lowered her head, and took a deep breath. "Arthur, I love you. But what my father said, it will always try to pull us apart. The competition with Spencer Group will threaten this relationship. Maybe this is our final test." Arthur looked at Sophie with love and determination in his eyes. "This is our decision, Sophie. The companies, the business, your father, they all take a back seat. I want to be with you. Let's move forward together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. I'm always by your side." Sophie found confidence in Arthur's words once again. She was determined to leave behind all her fears and the scars from the past. But she knew there was one more thing she had to do before everything could come to an end. She had to confront her father. A few days later, Sophie decided to visit her father's office. This was a big step against the pressures her entire family had placed on her. However, continuing her relationship with Arthur was the right choice for her. As she approached her father's office, her heart raced. She knocked on the door and entered. Her father was sitting behind his desk, looking at her coldly. "Sophie," he said, with a stern look in his eyes, "your relationship with Spencer must end." "I've lost my trust in you," her father said, giving Sophie a deep look in her eyes. "Things have become too complicated. Your relationship with Spencer is not only endangering the family business, but also putting our entire future at risk. I expect you to end this relationship." Sophie's heart raced at her father's harsh words, but she didn't hesitate for a moment. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment to reject the pressure that had hung over her like a shadow for years. She no longer had to live the life her father wanted for her. Slowly lifting her head, she looked at her father and boldly responded. "No, father," Sophie said, her voice filled with determination and strength. "I choose to live the way you don't want. I'm with Arthur. I will no longer live according to you and your business. This life is mine, and I will move forward with my own decisions, not with your expectations." Her father saw the determination and courage in her eyes. No matter how much pressure he exerted, Sophie was no longer the same person. She was a woman who had chosen her own path. Her father realized that he had lost her, and that her choice was his own mistake. But at the same time, he felt anger and disappointment in his daughter's decisions. "Sophie," her father said, his voice filled with deep sorrow, "if this is your choice, follow it. But remember, the future of Wilkins Group depends on your decisions. And this will lead you to losing the little girl I once knew." Ignoring her father's words, Sophie slowly closed the door behind her and walked out of the room. Inside, she felt a sense of freedom, knowing she was taking a step toward a new beginning with Arthur. Being with him, choosing her own life, it all felt right. She took a deep breath. This decision was not only starting her relationship, but also her own inner journey. That evening, when she met Arthur, the connection between them was stronger than ever. As they sat in the corner of the restaurant, their eyes locked. Sophie leaned toward Arthur and spoke slowly, but with conviction. "Arthur, I've talked to my father," she said. "And while he may have lost his trust in me, I love you. And being with you is above everything. Whether it's business or family, nothing can tear us apart." Arthur, taking Sophie's hand, moved closer to her. "We'll overcome this together, Sophie. Families, the business world, everything is temporary. But the bond between us is permanent. I love you for who you are, and I accept you with everything." In that moment, both of them felt the love, trust, and determination they shared for each other. They would no longer allow the past, the competition, or the threats to stand in their way. The love they had for each other had become a force that could overcome anything. A week later, Sophie and Arthur found themselves facing a new crossroads in the business world. Sophie's relationship with her father had completely transformed. The rivalry between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group had reached a pivotal decision-making stage, one that would impact the future of both companies. This confrontation would not only affect their relationship, but also the future of their companies. Sophie felt ready for this confrontation with Arthur by her side. The decision to merge or collaborate between the companies could lead to profound changes in both of their lives. However, when they decided to move forward together, nothing seemed to be able to stop them. The idea of combining both sides' strengths would create a new beginning, not only in the business world but also emotionally. Arthur organized a major meeting at Spencer Group's headquarters to announce this collaboration. Sophie was by his side, and with her support, everything seemed easier. The other board members discussed why the merger between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group was necessary. But above all, Sophie and Arthur, supporting each other, had strengthened their belief that they would overcome every challenge together. During the meeting, Sophie was waiting for the moment she would face her father. She knew that in order to overcome everything, they both had to act courageously and honestly. To do so, they would have to risk everything. And in that moment, Sophie made a decision. They would either leave the past behind and walk toward the future together, or everything would come to an end. Sophie, standing by Arthur's side, made her way toward Spencer Group's headquarters. Inside her, there was a mix of anger and hurt towards her father, along with a deep love for Arthur. Today was one of the most important days of their lives. This meeting would change everything, not only in the business world, but also emotionally. If the decision to merge Wilkins Group and Spencer Group was made, it would mark a turning point not only for their companies, but for their personal lives as well. Arthur noticed the determination on Sophie's face as he spoke with the other executives in the meeting room. Together, they were determined to overcome all these challenges. Above all, their trust and love for each other made them strong. However, this was a business decision, and everything would not just be shaped by the business world, but by their emotional connection as well. In the middle of the meeting, Sophie's father suddenly entered the room. There was anger and frustration in his eyes. The silence between them immediately drew everyone's attention. His gaze shifted first to Sophie, then to Arthur. His presence made the critical moment of the meeting even more tense. Everyone took a step back, as this moment was not just about business, but also about an emotional reckoning. Sophie's heart began to race. Her father's words still echoed in her ears. "Sophie, if you continue with Arthur, you'll lose the family business. Merging with Spencer Group will be the end of Wilkins Group." But she was determined to go down this path. The pressure and threats from her family could no longer stop her love. After a long silence, her father spoke. Sophie, end this relationship with Spencer. It threatens not just your companies, but you as well. You need to do what's necessary to protect the family business. Sophie raised her head, responding with strength. No, father. I won't end this relationship. I will be with Arthur. This is my choice. And I won't live the way you want me to. I'm choosing my own path now. Arthur, his hands tightly clasped on the table, gave Sophie a silent nod of approval. Their trust in each other would help them overcome all the complexities. Turning to her father, Arthur said, "The merger of Wilkins Group and Spencer Group is the right step for both the business world and for us. We've decided to move forward together. Above all, I choose to be with Sophie." Her father, momentarily stunned by the seriousness of their words and Sophie's determination, felt a mix of years of rivalry and the fear of losing Sophie. But this was teaching him his greatest lesson. He could no longer control his daughter's life. Sophie had grown and was now making her own decisions, and this decision would change everyone's lives. Sophie heard her father's final words, breaking the silence. "Sophie, if you continue with this relationship, Wilkins Group's future will be too dangerous to continue with you. So I'm telling you one last time, either you end your relationship with Spencer, or everything will come to an end." Sophie didn't look away from her father's eyes. Her fears, anger, and sadness were replaced by a quiet resolve. She heard what he said, but this time she wouldn't yield to him. "Father, I won't follow the same path as you. I'm choosing my own way. I will build this future with Arthur." Arthur, standing beside her, supported Sophie's words. "The merger of Wilkins Group and Spencer Group will be a major step for both sides. We can succeed together, but no matter what, I'll be by Sophie's side." Despite all the anger and disappointment inside him, her father silently left the room. Sophie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment, she had experienced the greatest change in her life. Her bond with her father could no longer stand in her way. With Arthur, she had chosen her own path. Now they were entering a new phase not only in the business world but emotionally as well. A week later, a formal decision was made for the merger between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group. This merger had a significant impact on the business world. However, for Sophie and Arthur, it meant even more. It was a step that not only solidified their business, but also strengthened their trust and love for each other. Sophie and Arthur were now working as a team, stepping into the future with the trust they had in each other. The challenges in the business world only made their personal bond stronger. Their love for each other was always a priority, and above all, the power of being together allowed them to overcome everything. After the merger of Wilkins Group and Spencer Group, Sophie and Arthur had taken a significant step in the business world. This step not only shaped the future of their companies, but also further strengthened their bond with each other. They were stronger together, but in the business world, everything would take time to change, and they would face many new challenges. One morning, Arthur was preparing to attend a major meeting as the new CEO of Spencer Group. The other executives at the meeting would discuss the opportunities and challenges brought by the merger. However, in Arthur's mind, there was still the emotional weight of his relationship with Sophie. Would the strategic discussions about the future of the company complicate their relationship even further? The fear of losing Sophie was, as always, keeping him on edge. Before attending the meeting, Arthur went to Sophie's room to see her. "Today is a very important day, Sophie," he said, watching her thoughtfully. "This merger is a huge step, but when I'm with you, I feel like everything is easier." Sophie felt a great sense of security from Arthur's words. The time they would spend together seemed to offer them more opportunities and strength. "Yes, but I'm not sure how much the challenges that come with this merger will push us in the business world," Sophie said. "The turmoil between our families, we'll have to see how it affects our work life over time." Arthur walked up to Sophie and took her hands. "But remember, above all, I choose you. I'm here to overcome every obstacle together. Every challenge we face in the business world will only make our bond stronger." Sophie nodded, drawing courage from Arthur's words. "We'll overcome everything together. But sometimes confronting my father is really hard. Changing his perspective always seemed like an impossible dream." Arthur smiled softly and replied, "That's why I love you, Sophie. because you always make the right decisions to overcome every challenge. And I will always be by your side." Before leaving for the meeting, Arthur hugged Sophie once more. His trust gave Sophie more strength each day. As Arthur headed to Spencer Group's offices for the meeting, he was weighing all the decisions in his mind. The meeting participants discussed how the merger would take shape and the future strategies for the companies. But beyond everything, there was one thing on Arthur's mind: Sophie's father and Wilkins Group's approach. During the meeting, despite his confidence, Arthur still felt the anger Sophie's family had toward him. However, taking a step forward was necessary not only because of his feelings for Sophie, but also for the future of the company. Reducing Wilkins Group's influence meant advancing Spencer Group one step further. Just as the meeting was about to end, Arthur received a message on his phone. It was from Sophie. "Arthur, I confronted my father one last time. I need you by my side to make sure everything goes well." Reading the message, Arthur realized that Sophie's confrontation with her father was now one step closer. At that moment, they were witnessing perhaps one of the most critical points in their lives. Arthur could feel Sophie's determination. Now, a step needed to be taken not just for business, but to secure their emotional connection as well. As soon as the meeting ended, Arthur quickly called Sophie. "Sophie, I know everything is going to be fine, but when you decide to confront your father, I want to be there with you. No matter what, this will be a journey we walk together." Sophie's voice on the phone sounded filled with excitement. "Arthur, we are together. We won't walk this path alone. I'm waiting for everything to slowly fall into place. We will overcome whatever challenges come our way. I choose you." After the message and conversation, Arthur decided once again to stand by Sophie. The foundation of their relationship was built on strong trust and love. Now, this would help them overcome every obstacle, not only in the business world, but also in their personal lives. Sophie and Arthur's lives were becoming more complicated with each passing day. The merger between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group had caused a huge stir in the business world. This merger wasn't only significant economically, but it was also testing Sophie and Arthur's relationship. Sophie had decided to set aside her anger toward her father and her own feelings and trust Arthur. However, the fact that this trust was pitting both families against each other was making their relationship even more difficult. A week later, a major announcement was expected to take place at Spencer Group's headquarters. The merger of the two companies had drawn great interest from investors, and the media was eagerly awaiting the event. Sophie was by Arthur's side, and the fact that they were making these decisions together gave her strength. But at that moment, there was still one question on her mind. How would her father react to this merger? Sophie was filled with fear about how her father would respond, but her trust in Arthur kept pushing her to take one more step forward. One morning, as they were preparing to head to the meeting, Arthur turned to Sophie and said, "Sophie, as important as this merger is for us, the trust between us is just as important. I believe we can overcome everything, but we can't ignore the challenges that await us in the business world." Sophie looked into Arthur's eyes and said, "I know, but I chose you, Arthur. My father has always prioritized his loyalty to Wilkins Group, but I believe in you. Walking this path together comes before everything else." Arthur smiled and took Sophie's hands in his, saying, "We will overcome every obstacle together, Sophie. I love you, and I accept you for everything you are." The day of the meeting arrived, and the merger between Spencer Group and Wilkins Group had excited the entire business world. Sophie and Arthur were about to make an announcement at a major press conference. This announcement would not only test their professional lives, but also their emotional bond once again. Everyone present at the meeting would discuss the opportunities and risks brought by this merger. However, the biggest risk was whether everything would be successfully completed or not. Before entering the meeting room, Sophie and Arthur exchanged one last look, giving each other courage. Sophie's father's reaction was still uncertain. As the CEO of Wilkins Group, her father's opposition to the merger could complicate matters even further. However, both of them were determined to face this battle together, trusting each other. Once in the meeting room, everyone took their seats. Arthur and Sophie explained all the details of the merger. This decision offered great opportunities for both sides. However, These opportunities would also affect the future of both families. After Arthur finished speaking, he turned to Sophie and said, "This is our decision, and we will walk this path together. We will build everything, our family, our business, our love, together," he said, in a moment when everyone in the room was watching them closely. The determination in Sophie's eyes showed how sincere his words were. The confidence in Arthur's voice reinforced their hopes for the future. There was a brief silence in the meeting room. Board members discussed how impactful the merger would be in the business world. However, it was clear that Arthur and Sophie had made these decisions not only as business choices, but as a life choice. The trust and love between them came before everything else. Sophie, holding Arthur's hand tightly, said, "Yes, no matter where this path leads, I will be with you. Challenges, obstacles, we can overcome all of them, because we believe in each other." When the meeting ended, everyone left the room. However, for Arthur and Sophie, this meeting had transcended beyond just a business decision. Their love for each other was bigger and stronger than all the pressures of the business world. Now they would do everything together. Their families, the remnants of the past, the struggles in the business world, all of them would be obstacles to overcome together. That evening, when Sophie met Arthur for dinner at a restaurant, their bond grew even stronger. After years of searching for her own path, Sophie finally felt she had made the right decision. At the core of everything was her trust in Arthur. They had both shed the burdens of the past and decided to focus on the future. Looking into Arthur's eyes, Sophie said, "You know, right? The past is behind us now. This relationship is not just about you and me, but also about the future of our two families. The merger of Wilkins Group and Spencer Group is a new beginning." Arthur smiled lightly and placed his hands over hers. "Yes, a new beginning. Together, we'll overcome every challenge. I love you, Sophie. With you, I can face anything in this world." Sophie sincerely felt the truth in Arthur's words. Being with him was the best choice she had ever made. Together, they knew they could achieve anything. Their love not only strengthened the bond between them, but also shaped the decisions they would make in the business world. A week later, the details of the merger between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group were announced throughout the business world. It was a significant opportunity for both sides. Sophie and Arthur were experiencing major changes, not only in the business world, but also in their personal lives. They were about to chart a new path together, overcoming all the expectations of their families and the obstacles left behind by the dark marks of the past. The union of Arthur and Sophie was not only about the merger of companies, but also about two people from different worlds accepting each other. This merger marked the beginning of a new era in their personal lives as well. Challenges, obstacles, competition, all of these had brought them closer, because nothing now was greater than the power of their love. After her confrontation with her father, Sophie was starting to replace the anger she felt toward her family with a new sense of peace. The biggest decision of her life had been to choose her own path. Now, with Arthur by her side, they would take every step together, grow together, and succeed together. Holding Sophie's hand, Arthur said, "A new beginning, Sophie. We've found the right time to build our future together." He continued, "We're starting a major change in the business world, but this will mark the beginning of a new era for both the Wilkins and Spencer families." Sophie smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I know, Arthur, and we're ready to overcome everything together." After the merger of Wilkins Group and Spencer Group, Sophie and Arthur took significant steps in the company's new leadership. Every challenge in the business world strengthened their trust in each other, and they felt the power of working together more with each passing day. However, these major steps they took in business also led them into a personal transformation process. They no longer just trusted each other in their work, but also in their lives, sharing the peace that came from living every moment together. One morning, while Arthur was presenting Spencer Group's new projects, there was a determination in his eyes. The steps they would take forward would not only shape their work, but also their relationship. Sophie stood by Arthur, supporting him in every way. Being with him meant overcoming every challenge together. After the meeting, Arthur turned to Sophie and said, "Sophie, everything is brighter and more meaningful with you. It's truly amazing to be working on this new project with you." Sophie smiled, her eyes shining. "Arthur, I love you. I believe everything is unfolding in the best way possible." The future of our company passes through the strength of our love. We will succeed together. Arthur took Sophie's hand and moved closer to her. Yes, Sophie. We will succeed in everything together. With each step, we will grow closer and build our life. With their trust in each other, they would take even more solid steps on their journey that would last a lifetime. The victories they gained in both their professional and personal lives would make them both stronger and more connected, and with each new step, they would move forward, trusting each other more. A year later, the merger between Wilkins Group and Spencer Group had been a tremendous success. The two companies had reinforced their leadership in the industry by combining each other's strengths. However, as much as their success in the business world, the love they shared for each other had become the greatest victory of their lives. Now, everything was shaped by their commitment to one another. Sophie and Arthur had found great balance not only in the business world, but also in their personal lives. They were developing new projects together and participating in global events. But above all, the love they shared made them even stronger against every challenge they faced. One day, Arthur decided to surprise Sophie. He made a reservation for a beautiful dinner and said to Sophie, "Sophie, everything has been so beautiful with you. Sharing my life with you is the most valuable part of everything. Now I offer you a lifetime together." Sophie, with tears in her eyes, replied, "Arthur, I love you. Every moment we've spent together is so precious to me. Building the future with you is the most wonderful thing." Arthur slowly took Sophie's hand, took out the ring, and extended it toward her. "Then, forever together." Sophie smiled and nodded. "Yes, forever together." And so, Sophie and Arthur reached a happy ending not only in the business world, but also in their lives, with the infinite trust and love they shared. Every challenge, every obstacle, only strengthened their love. The life they built together was a success that would serve as an example in both their professional and personal lives.